Well, hello and welcome. Welcome to Quilt Conversations Live. It's so good to be with you. How is everyone? I'm so glad that we're together again. Hello, Elaine. Welcome. We have missed you. Hello, Lorraine. Hi, Lori. I should say aloha to Lori. She's in Hawaii. Hello, Cassie. Hello, hello. And Terry is in the house. Hello, Marcia. Marcia, you're always the first one to show up. And hello, Copper. Hello, Patricia. So glad that you're here. We are going to talk about scrap quilts. My comments are looking a little weird tonight. Let me get that fixed. That looks a little strange. Let's see if I can fix that. All right. Hello, Tasha. How are you? So glad that you're here. Welcome, welcome. Oh boy, that's getting really strange. All right. I'll fix that later. Let's see if I can get this fixed. Get that up there. Okay. All right. Hopefully that's going to be better. All right. So, scrap quilts. Hello, Carol. Welcome. So glad that you're here. Hello, Rhonda. Well, scrap quilts. Got scraps? How many of you ladies have scraps for days? Do you make scrap quilts? We're going to talk about scraps and what we can make and do with them and how we can use them to help us grow and improve as quilters. Lori says she loves scraps. Awesome. Welcome, welcome. Yes, yes, yes. I'm so glad that everyone is here tonight. I'm excited to share with you one of the things that I do with scraps. I use it to enter competitions when it's a one block project or it's a mini quilt or a mug mat. One of the things that I've used and done, you've seen the pillow. Did you see the pillow? I'm going to go to the overhead camera. This is the pillow that I made. It was a test to make a star block, a wonky star block. And I use all kinds of scrap fabric, every single way. There's scrap fabric here and here. And that was a way for me to practice making this star block for a competition. And then I said, well, let me take some scraps and keep making it bigger and bigger until it became a pillow. I love making scraps with making quilts and other projects with scraps. Another thing that I love to do with scraps, you know that I'm a quilt designer. When I design a quilt for publication, I always test. If you have been with me for a while at Quilt Conversations Live, you know that I test all the time. And I tell you the test, right? So once I design a pattern and I have blocks, each block is tested with scrap fabric before I actually cut into the quilt fabric for the final quilt. So I am making a red and white quilt. So I said every time that I test a quilt block for a new quilt design, I'm going to use red and white scrap fabric to test the blocks. That way, all the blocks eventually will be in the quilt. Let us know in the chat how you use, hello Cynthia, so glad that you're here, how you use scrap fabric. All right, I have to fix this comment. It's really too small. Let me see if I can fix that. I have to take a few minutes. Okay, that is much better. All right, that looks better. That way everyone can see it. It's not too tiny. go, Marsha says, go big red, Dina. So I'm making a red and white quilt, and every time I make a new quilt pattern, I'm making a red and white, and I'm testing the blocks that way. So these were from blocks from quilts I've designed for magazines. Let's see if I can get that down. There we go. So these are blocks that were tested, and they for a magazine pattern. But eventually now they will all go into a quilt. So that's one way to maximize our fabric, right? I love maximizing our fabric. That's one way to do it. Let's see. Hello, Pam. Welcome. So glad that you're here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Did I miss anyone else that's new? If you're new, you are welcome here. Hello, Jazzy. So glad that you're here. Now, I want to share with you some of the projects that I've done with scrap fabrics when I was a beginning quilter, but I'm going to save those to a little bit later. I want to give you an update of what's been happening with Quilt Conversations Live and with Living Water Quilter, the things that I've been up to. And as you know, every month there is a discount on one of my courses. And so in line with the whole scrap fabric, I decided to make, for the month of May, the video on fabric preparation is discounted. So if you go to the website, if you're not in the 10 steps to stress-free machine quilting course, if you are not in that course, you can get each of those 10 steps as a separate individual course. So say you don't want all 10 steps. Say you only need a few of the steps. So some of those steps have been taken out as individual courses. And it's this course right here, Fabric Prep Tips and Supplies. So that's the course of the month. You can get that course at a discount for the month of May. If you want all 10 courses, which I recommend, you get the 10 steps to stress-free machine quilting. But if you only need a couple of different help with different parts of the process, then you can get the individual courses. So I wanted to let you know about that. The other thing that I've been up to, how many of you know that I was once a photographer? Let me know in the chat. Did you know I was a professional photographer? Professional photographer for the Los Angeles Times. And as a result, I kind of have this advantage when it comes to setting up live streaming because I'm kind of a techie person. So many people have been asking me. Terry says that she knew. Yes, thank you, Terry. Yes, Jazzy remembers. Wonderful. So I've been getting questions about my live stream setup and all the things that I do for tech, for going live, for creating content, for shooting video. And I finally put together a new website and a new course to help other, and my heart is for other quilters. If you are a quilter and you are on YouTube and you live stream and you want help with how to grow your channel, how to connect with your community and with brands, I've put together that course. And I really want to help other quilters. That is my ultimate goal. And so this is the website. I'll show it to you. It's called Third Parallel Media. Third Parallel Media, or 3PM, is a new website where I help with all kinds of things tech, so that you can create your video courses, that you can go live, that you can share your quilt projects, teach quilt classes virtually on Zoom. And a lot of us need help with that. And I want to be there to help other quilters with that. So it's 3PM. And I want to help ladies with the tech surrounding putting together their content for courses, specifically crafters. So if you know any crafters, let me know. All right, so that's what I've been up to. The other thing, did you notice I changed the quilt out in the back behind me? It's now the Beautiful Sister quilt. If you are new here, the Beautiful Sister quilt launched in February. It was debuted at QuiltCon in Atlanta. and we have a fabric kit for both the quilt block and the quilt. And soon I'm going to release a course for the Beautiful Sister quilt. This is when the quilt hung at Atlanta. Now it's behind me. Hey, Cookie's in the house. Let's see. Did someone say my sister's? Oh, yeah. Beautiful Sister is my sister Cookie. Yes, Copper, you remember. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you so much. Copper loves the quilt. Thank you. Ah, Glory, the background. Yes. So either you can make the whole quilt or you can make the block only. The block can be used in a number of ways, like a tote bag, a pillow, whatever you want to do. So we have a guest today, and I'm so glad that she has arrived. We have a guest today, which is perfect timing because I was just finished with talking about the Beautiful Sister quilt, and she loves scrap quilts. Her name is Tina Johnson, and she has a YouTube channel, and she's going to share with us her tips for scrap quilts. So if you don't have your notebook, get your notebook, get a pen. She has a couple of tools that she uses to make scrap quilts to help us use them creatively. And I'm looking forward to having her. Give her a warm welcome. Let me add her in. Let me assign her. Let's see, guest number 1. All right. She looks like she's ready. Here we go. Let me see, guest number 1. Here we go.
Hello
Everyone,
there.
there is Tina. Welcome, Tina. We're so glad that you're here.
Hello, everybody.
Everyone, give a warm welcome. Tina, would you please introduce yourself and let everyone know who you are, what you do?
Well, similar to yourself, we're STEM minded. So, of course, we have that in common because I'm a chemical engineer and I've spent my whole career in the oil field. So, that is what has brought me down to Texas. I'm originally from East Baltimore, Maryland. And I tell you, the rich history of quilting actually was in my family, and I just didn't know. But a dear friend of mine named Patrice, who is here native to Texas, West Texas specifically, she convinced me to make a quilt. And that's how I got started.
Well, ladies, don't you love that? Friends who help friends become quilters. That's fantastic, Tina. Now, you got introduced from your friend, but what was the turning point for you to say, I'm not only going to learn, but I'm going to continue and then teach quilting?
You know, you know how sometimes a bug bites you, and once it gets you, it doesn't let you loose, so to speak. Well, I have to say, I knew quilting was for me from the very first quilt I made for my little sister, and which was the quilt that Patrice helped me start and do. And what I liked about it was I walked into a beautiful quilt shop in East Moseley in London, and which was near my house at the time. And long, hanging from the ceiling along the wall, you saw all these beautiful quilts. They were embroidered, they were appliqué, different types of blocks and whatnot, different colors, and there was just so much potential. And I think that's what immediately drew me in, although I would not have been able to put it in those words at that time, but that is what it was. And I basically said, "Oh, I want that in her quilt, that in her quilt, and that in her quilt." And before you know it, Miss Val, who was the instructor at Creative Quilting, she said, "Okay, well, let's just take it one block at a time." She never said I was well beyond my skill level, which I only knew how to do basic sewing at that time. So she didn't discourage me at all. She told me to draw it out, and she looked at that very, I would say, abstract representation of the quilt and said, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to do it together.
I love that, one block at a time. What a great philosophy that is, because that is a way to encourage us to continue and know that we don't have to look at the big quilt, the big project. Just concentrate on that one block. Now,
Absolutely.
what introduced you to scrap quilting?
Believe it or not, it was actually probably about the third or fourth quilt that I made. I made it actually here when I got back to Texas. And I'm still wanting to be connected to my friends in London. They were doing an online kind of retreat before we kind of had online retreats like we know them today. And I wanted to participate. So the challenge was log cabin quilts for the weekend, like just make as much many log cabin blocks, any kind of way you wanted. And for some reason, I wanted to make a quilt for my baby sister at the time. And I needed the quilt to represent her personality. That's the thing that I like to make sure that the quilts, once received, a person will really know that it's for them, right? So I took scraps because I know she's not a person who likes new things. She likes things that have a history to them. She loves textiles. She loves kind of neutral colors. And I just kept going with it, right? And before I knew it, I had a beautiful quilt, which, if I could show that to you here, can you see that? Very
Yes, we
improvisational.
can. Yes, you can even hold it up
Uh,
higher. Yeah. What
there we
beautiful.
go. There we go. I'll go this way as well. And it was the designing of it, of the scrap quilt, that I guess just caught me at the time. I wouldn't say that I made a lot of scrap quilts right after that, but I definitely enjoyed the ability to say, okay, I know I need the block to be scrappy, so that she would enjoy it, but the engineer in me still needed a bit of a control. So actually, the border is a complete log cabin as well, which complements the blocks. So I got that balance of the improv for her, and then my mind could calm down because the border was actually kind of nice and symmetrical. So it stayed with me. So I actually entered this quilt in the West Houston Guild show that year, and someone said, "I really like what you did," and I was like, "You did?" Like I just, in my mind, it was kind of like, "Oh, I could just kind of threw that together, kind of, and just let the fabric talk to me." And let the blocks talk to me and just played. And when I realized that scraps allow you to do that, I was like, aha. So similar to, I think, some of the answer you gave earlier about how you take scraps and you use it to test out quilt blocks. For me, it's kind of the other way. I can look at a quilt block, a well, published pattern and say, how would that look scrappy? And how can I use my scraps to make that quilt and tell a different story than probably the author of the pattern intended?
I love that because then the quilt becomes both a representation of the artist who's making the quilt and who you're
Hmm.
making it for. So both come into play, and that is a good combination. And I
Hmm.
love the idea of taking traditional blocks and saying, how can I put a twist on it with scrap quilting? That's such a
Hmm.
neat way of looking at it. So
Hmm.
you've made quilts for a family, you've learned how to make one block at a time, you've entered quilts and shows, you are
Hmm.
clearly bitten by the quilting bug.
Yes.
But not everyone jumps into teaching. How did that happen? How did you decide that you wanted to show others your method for using scraps?
Well, I'm gonna have to be a little transparent on this one. Um, as many things in life, when you started out, you bring friends into it with you. So I was obviously a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs for this, and I had to say to myself, okay, I need some of my friends to join me. And I did have a guild, and a bee within my guild rather, that was very supportive. They taught me so much, and they are fantastic quilters, right? Absolutely fantastic quilters. But I was like, oh, I want to bring more people into the fold. Well, that meant I had to show my friends who didn't even know how to sew, how to quilt, but I had to entice them a bit. So I started doing retreats, and it was a kind of a natural flow to teach them at the retreats. And it kind of just, I think, naturally blossomed from there, if that makes sense. And then more people wanted to come to the retreats, and then I had ideas about how to do different retreats as well. And I think the engineer in me, because in my job I have to teach all the time too. It was just kind of like, well, how would I want to learn this, and how can I teach in a way that maybe some other teachers don't teach, and bring more people into the fold. And that, I think that was really the idea in the back of my head as I watched, because I was a member of two different guilds, and I sat as a membership chair, and I realized that the growth of the guilds wasn't as strong as they had historically been. So that was in the back of my mind. How do we all reach one, teach one, and bring more in over time? And it just kept, that thought kept sticking with me. So I needed some friends, and then I needed some others as well.
Well, I love that beginning. Bring friends along, and it's so much more fun. Now, how do you begin to share with friends who don't sew how to quilt? What was the invite? Was it a quilt block? Was what did you show them to say you want to try this? Do you have an example
Um,
of one of your quilt blocks that was a traditional block that you used with Scrappy, or another quilt that you can share with us?
I think that it was, well, actually, yes, I think it's Limelight, and Limelight will be brought over here in just a second. So I'll tell the story that I think it wasn't so much a block, but it was a quilt. So as that quilt was seen in my house, it kind of enticed people, friends, to say, "Oh, I want that." Right? Well, is I'm not going to make everybody the same quilt, right? And everybody's not going to get a quilt at the same time. So to me, I was like, well, honestly, if you want one, and if you want one quickly, you're going to have to make it yourself. And I think, just as Miss Val did for me, I kind of conveyed, you can do this. You just have to do one stitch at a time. You don't have to look for perfection. And the very first retreat I did, actually, I did it as a jelly roll quilt, and with the only intent of making sure that people understood how to sew straight. And we did a jelly roll race quilt. I listened to what people wanted based on the pictures I showed them. So I use, we all know, those of us who quote the variations, is about good 5 or 6 variations. And I let people pick what they wanted, walk them through step by step, not using too much terminology, not really, pushing them to have the perfect quarter inch either, because it really doesn't matter once the quilt is done, and with a jelly roll quilt, that is. And then I let them pick their borders, and in that retreat, I saw some folks who had never quilted before did inner and outer borders. They did miter corners. And for me, it was just about the patience, that I kind of, I think, brought to them, to say, just take it slow. Think about tell me what you want. We'll walk through it. And before you knew it, everyone had something. So with that success, the word kind of spread. And even though I'm still here in Texas, all of my friends in the DMV now want me to come up there and show them too.
No,
So,
that's wonderful. Well, you know what? How about we share some of your quilts? I'm going to change the scene to another scene so that
okay,
we can see your quilts a little bit better. I
okay.
think that, yeah, here we go. I know the ladies in the chat want to see more of your quilts. Is that a yes, ladies? And then perhaps share the story behind the quilts and
Okay,
the scrappiness of it. All
okay.
right, ready. Hmm.
Let's see the first one. You're going to show on this screen, or you want me to show mine
No,
here?
oh, could you show them if you have them
Oh,
with you?
okay.
Yeah.
I sure do. So this is Limelight that I was mentioning. I had entered it, and I won third place in my guild session. So this wasn't so much to me this is a controlled scrappy because I had scrappy greens, scrappy purples, and in the blocks what you'll notice is the graduation of the tones of the color. And I kept that consistent, and therefore when you see it in video it looks quite stunning. And the interesting part about this quilt is purple is my favorite color. Anybody's around me that will know that almost immediately. But it wasn't until it was completely finished, quilted, bounded, and I took photos of it and I realized that actually this quilt is green. So I had to call it limelight. I couldn't call it purple or have anything associated with purple really in its name. Isn't that funny how somehow that visualization just changes everything?
I love the name Limelight. I think it's a big hit in the chat. People are saying how they love it.
Thank you. This is another one I'd say where you a lot of times you'll hear people say, well, scrap quilts look too chaotic. It's too much, right? Similar to what they say about like sometimes K-facet fabrics, right? They're so bold, there's so much there. They need a place where their eye can rest. And in this quilt, I based it off of Laura's video. Her last name is escaping me right now, but the her phrase is her grandmother never met her quilt scrap that piece that she didn't like. She always used every single piece of her scraps. And when I saw that video, I thought, wow, that's amazing, right? And the fact that nothing gets thrown away, and she's up in Canada, so obviously they have a tremendous use for quilts. So I convinced the group to do the block as an exchange, but to control the scrappiness, the task was to pick one color that was always in each block. And let me see if you can tell which color was the color that helps control the colors in this quilt, because anything went was with respect to the scraps that were used. Do you see a constant color, so to speak?
I do, but I wonder from the ladies in the chat, what color do you see? They're asking, is it a light color or a dark color?
Um, Interesting enough, this actually winds up having two. We chose a one dark color, and then for whatever reason, you see visually there's actually a second that was unintentional.
Okay, so we're getting some guesses. We have
Okay.
maroon. Maroon is one
Mm-hmm.
guess.
Absolutely. And that was it. The burgundy was it. A burgundy wine, rich red kind of shading was here. There's definitely one in each of the blocks.
Someone
What was the
thought a pink color, or Terry Green says she keeps seeing red. Is that the burgundy or maroon?
that's hopefully that's the burgundy and the maroon. It's kind of in the reddish family. Yes. But amazingly, I didn't anticipate, of course, when I set up this exchange, I didn't anticipate the pink. But someone, or however many people, you tended to use pink, and therefore you see the burgundy and the pink. So that was a pleasant.
Wow. I love that concept that you can take
Mm-hmm.
one or two colors to help bring a little
Mm-hmm.
calmness to the scrappiness. It
Mm-hmm.
gives it this
Mm-hmm.
subtle relaxation of, I don't know how to describe it. Is that a correct
Yes.
way to say it? I don't know. Maybe in the
Yeah.
chat
The
you ladies.
calmness.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
And believe it or not, I think when you see that I wind up making this quilt three times, right? There's a picture of it on my socials where I did in fact use burgundy in the border, and because once I use burgundy in the border, then you really read all of the burgundy in it. But on this one, I haven't decided quite yet. Although you can see that, hopefully you can see that you may be able to see that it already is quilted. I wanted it I wanted to have examples of with and without the border to see that, so you can see the contrast from a tutorial standpoint. And also the third one, I think I'm going to do a light. border. And that way you kind of see the progression between the three different choices. And then it helps others to decide what they might want to do.
Okay, wonderful.
Hmm.
Love
You
that
want me to show
technique.
another one?
Absolutely. I don't think they would
Okay.
say no to another quilt.
Same concept, right? If you choose something to tie the scrappiness together, we just talked about color. Um, the other thing you could do is say theme. So this is my Christmas. So as you could tell, I like to influence people to do the quilts I want to do, and I convince them to make it into an exchange. So this is again another scrappy exchange quilt. And I just listened to everybody and I said, don't you want to do a Christmas quilt with me? A scrappy Christmas quilt? And I whispered in this person's ear and I whispered in that person's ear, and then they started talking, and it was like, yes. So we controlled the scrappiness in this quilt by making it Christmas themed. So mine, I just took all my blocks and put them together, right? Um, and I did do a bit of layout, making sure, of course, the reds were spread out, the greens were spread out. You don't want to have any one color clustered in an area, right? So you do want to make sure you unify as much as possible in the layout. But as you can see, hopefully you think I did a good job. And
Wow, fabulous.
so,
And so how many um main colors for this one? Two or one?
oh, we only went on theme. We
Oh,
only went on theme,
theme.
and it
Okay.
yeah, and it pulled together nicely just on theme, because if you think about it, most people associate reds, greens, gold, silvers, blues, there's some Christmas like frosty blues, and it all just came together. Now I put mine together, like I said, just everything went. Whereas Patrice put all her blues together in one quilt. So although we all had the same blocks, she did a different layout, and hers looks completely different than mine because she concentrated on her blues and her silvers. And I
Okay,
think she
so
used a little bit of the reds in the trim, maybe.
maybe. So I want to make sure I understand this right. And ladies, if
Mhm,
you're listening and you're taking notes, there are two techniques that you have, Tina. One is to use a color to
mhm,
go throughout the quilt, or two, like the
mhm,
maroon and pink in the previous quilt.
mhm.
In this quilt,
Right,
you can do the same thing of having the scrappiness having order to it by picking
correct,
one theme
correct.
for the fabric. Okay.
Hmm. And what I've learned on this one, I usually don't pick, I'd say, light borders too much, or colorfully, light colored borders. But one of the ladies in the exchange, Miss Rowe, she picked a green that I would have said is not a Christmas green. It wasn't a traditional Christmas green. And when I saw her quilt, I was like, well, shoot, I'm gonna go for it too and just see, let it ride. And I think it just, that different shade of green complemented everything with the red in particular. So it's one of my favorite quilts.
Yes, I
Absolutely.
agree. I love the lighter lime green. It adds just another little kick of color
Yes.
to the
Yes.
quilt against the traditional dark green. Wonderful
Yes.
choice.
Hmm. So I
Wonderful
had to thank her
choice.
for that. Now I will say this is one of the ones I'm more proud of as well, because I actually quilted this myself, and
Well,
hopefully you can see the quilting on the back.
we can see a little bit of that. Yes, maybe they can see it now. That's better. Oh, wow. Beautiful quilting. Look at that,
Thank
ladies.
you. And if you will
Yes.
allow me, I will say in this moment, don't be afraid. And of course, we met as I was taking your class in February at the conference, the QuiltCon conference. The Don't be afraid to try it. And to complement something you said earlier about scrap quilts and using them to test, I felt like I can test my quilting ability on my scrap quilts, right? Because clearly on the front, if I have a mistake, you don't really see it, right? And
Right.
the pressure off of being perfect on the front of your quilt. It just happened that on this one, I did. It is a computer. It was a computerized long arm that I did this on. So what I was testing out was my understanding of the software and scaling the design and getting it to fit within the quilt layout. And I think I did a reasonable job. I think there's still some learning for me to do, of course, because that was my first time, but not too bad.
Not too bad. Actually, very, very good.
Thank you. Thank
now,
you.
now, I want to know. A lot of ladies ask questions about the quilts behind you. So before I forget to ask, can you talk about
Hmm.
those quilts? Yes.
Well, I will say, I will encourage everyone to take some time. For me, quilting is very therapeutic. That's probably the other reason why the bug bit me so strong, right? I know how to knit. I was taught to crochet as a child as well, and I enjoy those crafts as well, and I do them all the time still. But there was just something a little bit different about quilting, and I think it comes down to the connections that we make as quilters. They seem to be a little bit different, a little bit more organic, a little bit more in depth than, say, some of the other crafts, and especially maybe some of the other needlework type crafts. So these wall hangings, actually, and the ones that are hanging up around my whole studio, they're from swaps that I did, and the swaps gave me a chance to meet other quilters who I wouldn't have necessarily met before. So I've done several of the QuiltCon swaps. I Sometimes I think we get intimidated when we see how fantastic stuff, things that people can make, and we sit down and we say, "Oh my God, what can we do? What can I do to be like, as good as an instructor or something I've seen hanging up at a conference?" And the reality is, if you just sit down, do your best, um, most people will really appreciate the effort that you've put into what you've made. And certainly, like this quilt was wall hanging was given to me, and all I ever ask is that it's purple, right? So everything is pretty much purple. Yeah, I don't stress the technique, whether it's embroidery, applique, etc. And so now I have some of the most beautiful wall hangings that actually I wouldn't have made, right? I wouldn't have done the sewing machine myself. I wouldn't have done an improvisational version of it. I've probably There's a lot of ruler work in this wall hanging here. She did a fantastic job. And it Nice big blocks. Look at that curve piecing. My curve piecing is still kind of 50-50. So I love this one. I love the fact that I have it. And I'd say the only two up here that I actually did was this cross. I did it as a test. I wanted to Paula was teaching a mosaic class when I was abroad, and it was all about mosaic piecing. And I really enjoyed that class, although everything you come out with is a little small, but that's okay. Small can be mighty and powerful. So, this is one of the things I made coming out of that class. So, still haven't quite finished it. I'm still thinking about the border and everything else I want to add to it, even though it's been a number of years. And that's okay because this is a judgment free zone. This is an applique piece, obviously an Hawaiian applique piece, and just to learn the technique. And turns out I do like needle turn applique. It was easier to do than I expected, and once I had the middle done, then I had to figure out what else I wanted to do with it, and I didn't have an idea really. So it took me a while to think about how I wanted the borders to look. I wound up going with, again, wanting just to test something out. It didn't have to be perfect. And I tested out the graduation in color from light to dark in the borders here, and they are mitered. I do love me some mitered borders. Um, so so I got to play. And I got to play with two different things, learning a new technique as well as trying something out on the borders. So one day I think I'll finish it because it's almost there.
Well, thank you for sharing. I totally agree. Having an opportunity to make a smaller quilt for an exchange is a wonderful way to try new things and also to give to other quilters. Now, in the middle of all that, you mentioned your studio. Are you set up to share a little bit of your studio to show us how you store your scraps?
I think I am. So I'm going to do two things right here from this area, and then I'll gently move the camera around so that you can see some
Okay.
others. Okay. So one of the things I like to do is I love to be able to visually see everything, right? I want to see the colors, the prettiness of my fabrics. So whether it's the use of baskets, whether it's a use of um, decorative, you'll see my decorative shelves in a second. I want to see things, right? And I want to see the beauty because, quite frankly, we have more fabric than quilts, right? Almost, right? So you have more ability to see the beautiness of your fabric than your quilts because they always leave for you, right? They always leave in your house. So I look for clear containers usually that are sturdy and have a good closure, right? So and I have a wide variety of things that I try, right? So this is an acrylic. Let me make sure I get this up high enough. This is acrylic drawer, so it's like a cosmetic drawer. And if you look, you can see that I've already cut my fabrics down to the size that I know I'm going to use in my scrap quilts, and they're sitting. I've color coordinated them here, and they look pretty on my cutting table, and I'm always ready to make basically a free quilt out of my scraps. And that's what scraps are to me. They're basically a free quilt. And a few years back, I thought to myself, if I made at least one scrap quilt a year and give it to a family member, after a while, pretty much all my family members are going to have quilts in their houses, and every time I go to their houses, I'll have a quilt to be under. So that's my goal. I haven't actually finished it yet, but some of my favorite houses have several quilts already, so I can snuggle up pretty well on the East Coast when I go home for Christmas.
Well,
So
that is a
definitely clear
neat idea.
container.
A cosmetic container with drawers
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
store different size scraps. Fantastic.
Absolutely. So now, before I got to doing that, I like I said earlier, I'm an engineer, and we know our environmental impact of our footprint and stuff like that. And for me, I love to recycle, right? Anything I can recycle, anything I can reuse, at least to try to extend the life of something I try. So another thing I do is, believe it or not, I take any, again, clear container that's sturdy, and it helps me because, say, for instance, in this example, I'm going to make sure I turn this without turning it upside down too much. All of my scraps are already in here and they're ready to go, right? So it's a clear, free container, so to speak. I think cheese was in this one. It was kind of like a cheese platter bits. And even if I turn it this way, you see I have my lights here, my darks there. I have my reds on this side. So this quilt will have a neutral to red to blue feel. So it may come out looking almost like a patriotic quilt because I have blues, reds, and whites, or it could be more of a muted version of a patriotic quilt. We'll see when it's done, right? That's the nature of a scrap quilt. You'll exactly know what you have when you're done. But what I also will say is I always save the pattern or a picture or something that was the inspiration of why I put those colors together, so that, as you know, there's more things on our bucket list that we have time to do, and the chances of me remembering are slim to none. So I need that friendly reminder with the fabric while it's organized. And one day, if I get to it, I get to it. If not, I can give it away as is, as a gift, and somebody else can actually do it. And actually, that happens a lot. I wind up actually giving these away because there's only been so many quilts you can make, right? So might as well let somebody else make it if they can make it faster than me.
Okay. We have a couple of questions coming in. So as you share, I'm going to ask
Hmm.
you some of those questions. We have a question from Terry Green. She asks, "How do you cut your fabric? Do you use an AccuQuilt cutter?"
So my thing is this, and if you look at it, couple of different folks about how they organize their scraps, right? Like Lori Holt does a really beautiful series on it. Bonnie Hunter as well. You have to figure out what works for you. And for me, if anything is bigger than 2.5 inches, that means that there's plenty of quilt patterns out there that use 2.5 inch squares, 2.5 inch wide strips. So I know that if I organize those one way, I've got a quilt, right? That's ready to go. For my scrap quilts, though, I tend to use actually my ruler, which is 2 inches by 3.5, right? Because it's a nice small size. I can take this ruler, put it on a irregularly shaped scrap, and then cut it, and I'm done. Now, AccuQuilt does have this as a die cut too. So if you do have AccuQuilt, you get whatever die cut size makes sense to you. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
It does. It does. Now, I know the ladies would love to see more of how you store quilts. Let's not run out of time because I want
Okay.
to show your ruler.
Okay.
And on your YouTube channel, do you have a tour of your studio and how you store your scrap fabrics?
I have a video on how I store them. Yes.
Okay.
How I
So
store strings and rectangles and squares. Yes.
okay, great. So ladies, we won't be able to go through all of her storing methods. You can go to her YouTube channel and subscribe to
Yeah.
see how she stores her scraps. I want you to see her tool that she has designed to help make some of the quilts that you've already seen. And I have another view where we both can
Mm-hmm.
be on camera and I'll show because she sent me the tool. Thank you very much. Thank you,
Mm-hmm.
thank you. Let's do that. Let's see. Let's see which one is it here. I think it's this one here. Yes, this is with both of us. Okay.
Okay.
So here's the tool that she mentioned. Now you can describe it because you know your tool better than I do.
Okay. Well, so the smaller one makes basically the rectangles that are within the block you have. And this is an excellent chance to say, look at the block versus the rectangle because your block, I just put all the colors together again, just making sure that I spreaded them out. But each of those rectangles are made from a 2 by 3.5 inch block, rectangle, excuse me. And that block takes up 18 rectangles. So depending on how you place your colors, you can really get quite a variety of layouts. Um, and the beauty on that one is that the when you put those blocks together, you have no seams that have to come together. No seams intersect within the block, and when you put the block together with its matching sisters and brothers, right? So you just again take that ruler, just like any other ruler you have. As your scraps build up over time, cut them down, organize the colors if you like. If you don't worry about it. As you can already tell, I like to organize my stuff by color because I like to use color in my. I like to work with my color placement in my quilt. So you use that very easily. Even like yesterday, even preparing for this and cleaning up my whole studio area, I had a stack of scraps, and in about 30, 45 minutes, I cut through that pile, and now those scraps are ready to be put on a quilt. I did a longer version of it because I actually found a couple of other quilt patterns that I liked that and a couple of other styles of blocks that uses a 5 inch long, 8 inch long, and block, excuse me, rectangle. So that's why I have them available in two sizes. So that way, between the two of them, you can pretty much do quite a few different quilt blocks.
Now I noticed that this size is three times this one,
Hmm.
which I
So
love
you can
that.
do longer rectangles. Hmm.
And I also love, and I didn't notice that until you mentioned it, that we don't have to nest seams, which is fantastic for beginners. This is a
Absolutely.
beautiful design. Now, ladies are asking about your YouTube channel. It's tenderly stitched, right?
That's correct. Hmm.
Okay. Now, you also sent me some additional blocks. What are these
Correct.
blocks?
So using the same, so the one with the African prints right there to your left, they still use the 2 by 3.5 inch rectangle, but then that top rectangle is, if memory serves me correct, 5.5 inches. If memory serves me correct. So hence you would cut that top one with the longer ruler. Correct.
Okay, you would cut this one right here with this longer
Hmm.
ruler. Okay.
Correct. So then you
And
have a,
then
you have a different another block you can play with.
and then these here are all the same. One, two, three, right?
That's right. You have an A and a B block. That's actually the Carolina chain, which is a Bonnie Hunter pattern, free pattern on her website. I love the fact that she has so many free patterns on her website. She has an A and a B block, and the smaller ruler cuts the rectangles and the square for that block. So it makes it easy to make that scrappy, which, like I said earlier, I like to talk people into doing exchanges that I want to do. And I actually did that Carolina chain exchange with a group of friends last year, I think that was. So we had a ball. And that particular quilt has a wonderful secondary pattern to it that runs on the diagonal, and it makes a difference whether you set it on grid or whether you set it on point. So you have quite a few options to play with, and many of us have already started to put ours together. So we are definitely playing with our blocks.
Fantastic. I love these for cutting. These are fantastic. Now, I did a little bit of cutting myself. I wanted to test out
Oh,
your ruler. I didn't have time to sew it together, but I took
uh-huh.
some beautiful sister blocks
Oh, yes,
using your template, and I hope to
yeah.
make a block by the
Wow,
weekend.
that's gonna be gorgeous.
And I cut some pieces, and then I took scraps from the beautiful sister quilt, the backing fabric that I used.
Mm-hmm.
I took
Mm-hmm.
those scraps to make
Ooh,
to help me
I think
with
fabric I have.
putting together. I haven't
Mm-hmm.
decided exactly how it's all going to go together, but I'm using your pattern and your ruler and scraps from the beautiful
Oh,
sister quilt.
oh,
So
fantastic.
we'll see how it looks. I'll put it
Now,
together and I'll post it. You ladies are going to have to follow and watch on Facebook and on Instagram. And if they want to get your rulers, how can they get these scrap rulers?
they'll have to order them off my website.
Off the
That they could
website.
order. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What is
Now,
your
I have a
website?
question for you. Oh,
Yes,
my website is tenderlystitch.com. Oh,
tenderlystitched.com. That's
mm-hmm.
the website where you can get the ruler. All right,
Mm-hmm.
ladies, you want to get the ruler. Now, I didn't take the backing off of it. There's a paper backing that needs to be
Yeah.
removed. I didn't take
Yeah.
that off so that you could see it on camera, but once you take it off, you'll be able to see the fabric to fussy cut
Yeah.
if you want. So I did a little fussy cutting with your ruler
Mm-hmm.
to make sure I
Mm-hmm.
had the face in. So I like that you can do that with this as well.
What
So
I was
you
going
were
to ask you is, what is your favorite grip to be placed on the back of your rulers? Because once you take that brown paper off, everyone has their preferences of what they like on their rulers. I was wondering what you like, because you mentioned one of them in the class, I believe, and I wanted to try it
uh
out.
geez, I don't remember it offhand right now. I can't think of the
Mm-hmm.
name, but there is a specific one sheet that I put over my rulers
Mm-hmm.
to help them
Yes.
not slide. Which
Okay.
reminds me, I thought that using a rotating mat would work
Yeah,
well with your rulers. Do you use a rotating mat with your ruler?
I do. I do,
You,
to make the cutting easier and quick. And I always use a sharp blade so I can go through 6 layers of fabric at one time and just
six
make
at
it
one
fast.
time?
Oh yes, a nice sharp blade. Yes. Now if it's
Wow.
dull, I can't obviously, but I'm short on time. I've got to do everything as fast as I can.
All right, so let's go back to the main camera. We have a few more minutes to get questions from the audience.
Okay.
Yes. So, a lot of ladies are excited about coming to your YouTube channel And like, actually, let me show that. Let me show your YouTube channel because I did put that up. So, ladies, you
Okay.
can go to her YouTube channel and you can watch some of her scrap quilt projects, learn how
Mm-hmm.
she stores fabric. Don't forget to subscribe. You support other quilters by subscribing, hitting the notification bell. They take time to create content to help you in your quilting journey. Subscribe to get more of that fantastic content. And follow
Mm-hmm.
her on Instagram and on other social media. You have Facebook page as well?
Yes, indeed. Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok.
Okay. And so your retreat, there's been a lot of chatter in the comments about your retreat. I think some of your retreat goers are in the chat here on YouTube, and they certainly are fans. They want people to know about your retreats. When do your retreats happen?
Oh, so I have my I do a summer and a spring. So I do the last week of March and the last week of July. And I do other retreats as the groups build. So sometimes I've done one in November. Sometimes I've been asked to do one in January. So I'm trying to get that January group really going because there's some people who really want to start the year off with a retreat so that they work on the things that they want to work on. So before they get too boggled down in the stuff that they do for others. So, and we're here in Houston. There's plenty of retreat centers to be booked around here, plenty of choices. We're definitely not spoiled for choice. I'm trying to develop one in the LA area as well because I have some folks out there that want one. And as I mentioned earlier, there's the DMV wants one too. So a lot of things to come. A lot of things to come.
So I heard Houston, Maryland, DC area, and then
Hmm.
what was the third area again?
LA.
LA. Okay. Wait
Hmm.
a minute. That's coast to coast. And
Hmm.
fantastic. So,
Hmm.
ladies, no
Hmm.
excuses. There are three locations where you can have fun making a scrap quilt with Tina. Um, can you share with us why you started during the retreat? I know that in our private conversation, you talked about this desire to keep not just quilting for making quilt's sake, but what was important to you was the community.
Yes, yes. I it's actually interesting 'cause I started doing my retreats well before COVID, right? And the first couple of years, things kind of started off slow, and then once that momentum, I think, got um, there, or maybe say critical mass, so to speak, they started to kind of take off, right? And I've done some for businesses as well as team builders for the employees. So I've been very blessed and fortunate that people have given me the opportunity um, to kind of create what they needed, right? And so I would say to answer your question, what I'd seen previously when I lived abroad, I went to on retreats 4 to 6 times a year. I absolutely loved going on retreats. And when I came to realize the thing I think I loved the most or saw was the community that was there. I think once upon a time we had more sense of community as just as a society, so to speak. And I kept overhearing women say, if I didn't have my quilting, I wouldn't have gotten through that divorce. I wouldn't have gotten through that time when, raising my child was a little difficult or children was a little difficult, or as they were taking care of elderly parents, right? They needed that outlet and they needed that community with them, right? And it's amazing to see how much support you get from the people that you engage with within quilting. And I, I honed in on that, and I wanted to make sure that I repeated that in the future, not only for myself but for others. And for me, that's the real beauty of what we do in retreats, and how just naturally things seem to happen organically.
Wonderful. Thank you for working very hard to keep the tradition of quilting and also the community surrounding quilting. I
Mhm.
am thankful for all those who came today to hear about your journey with quilting and specifically with scrap quilting. And thank you for the wonderful gift of your tools, your rulers. I will make
Absolutely.
the block and share it and let everyone know. Is there anything else that someone would like to ask Tina before she leaves us for today? Okay, so Copper says, Dina, we can't find Tina's ruler on her website.
Mm. Well, let me make sure that link is corrected and give me till tomorrow to make sure that whatever's happening is corrected.
Okay, so she will correct the link by tomorrow. And once she
Mhm.
does that, I will put that link right here on YouTube in the YouTube description so that you can get access to the ruler. Because I know there's ladies who are going to watch the replay and they're going to want to get your ruler. And they're
Absolutely.
two different rulers. Okay. All right. Anything else? That's it. Any additional questions, ladies? If not, let's give Tina a thank you for coming to share with us. Thank you, Tina.
Oh,
It,
thank you for having me.
hopefully, one day I'll make the retreat out in Houston. You know, I have family out there, and I'll schedule a
Oh,
trip maybe at the same time. That would be fun.
that
Wouldn't it be
sounds
fun?
perfect. Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Well, take care. Unless there's anything else you want to share before you sign off, I'll give you one more opportunity.
Well, I will end with a different view of my sewing space. How about that?
Okay. How's that? That sounds great.
All right. I will say my goodbyes and then let y'all enjoy the final view. If
All
I
right.
go, oh, you can't see it
Wow.
past that. Sorry about the light, but
No, that's fine. Everyone's excited to see it. Fantastic. Wow. So neat. So neat and organized. And it
only for
also
y'all.
it speaks to what you said earlier about how you want to store your fabric so that you can still see it. It's not hidden
Yes,
inside a container that you can't see through. It's on a shelf, very visible for inspiration and to enjoy the
yes,
color.
absolutely. I look at them every day.
Fantastic. Okay, bye, Tina. Thank you so much.
Bye bye.
What a wonderful time we've had with Tina. Was it fantastic? I'm so glad that she had a chance to be with us today and share with us her tips for using her rulers, but also techniques on color arrangement with scraps. Two techniques, a theme technique and a color technique to help order, someone said in the chat, the chaos. Thank you so much, Tina, and thank you to all your fans that came. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell right here on Living Water Quilters YouTube channel, because next time we come here every first and third Friday of the month, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We will have another special guest in a couple of weeks. We will have another interview with a quilter who has a rich history in quilting. Her family has been quilting for many years. Her family is well known. Their quilts are in museums, and I'm going to give just a little hint. Have you heard of the quilters called Gee's Bend? Well, one of the quilters will be here in a couple of weeks. She's written a couple of books, and she is also preserving quilt history by writing books and reaching the next generation of quilters. So I hope you can join us then. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and for all the ladies who attend Tina's retreats and coming to support her. So glad that you were here. Thank you for coming. Yes, it was a quick conversation. An hour goes by very quickly. We always have fun here. Yes, you're welcome, Marsha. Good night, Copper. Thank you for moderating the chat and being so proactive with getting all the links. Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you for joining us. You're welcome, Patrice. Thank you, thank you. And Kimberly, you are welcome. And Teresa Green. So glad you all could be here. I'll see you next time for another Quilt Conversations Live.
And that is a wrap. Bestie has been in the back. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can still hear you. We're not live though. They can't hear us.
Oh, there we go.